guys, we are back with our second episode of Borderline Ballers podcast. Last week, I don't think we explained exactly what Borderline Ballers means. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Lindsey. How are you?
Good. It's been a good week. It's been a busy week. I want you to explain to everyone the Borderline Ballers, how you came up with that name, because it's so epic.
Well, it is pretty epic, but throwing out a bunch of garbage names to you when we were talking about it, and I'm like, Tim, you got to get more creative than this. And I figured we've got a Canadian, that being you, Lindsey, and we have an American, that being me, and maybe someday you'll be a dual citizen. That would be awesome too. But we're right on the border, and we're talking about basketball, and I think that as much as both of us are excited about the type of players we were in our careers, we were probably borderline ballers. Like, we could have been really good or we could have been really bad. We don't know. So there's a bunch of play on words there.
So true. It's so true. Yeah. Was I a good enough baller? Was I? I think I was just borderline. I think it's just like the perfect name for us.
It is, but you played in college and I didn't, so that puts you at a level above the border in comparison to me. So I didn't get that luxury and that fun. So
yeah, but for me, it would have been the borderline and CIS competition, I think. So
that's for another episode.
That is
college basketball in Canada for us, because I think it's got a little bit of a different structure than here in the States, and people would be very intrigued about how that works. So
I don't know if they'd be intrigued, but we could tell them. It'd be good.
I'd be intrigued. So. Before we get into anything, I don't know if you were paying attention to what I guess is our alma mater today, but Coach Jim Boeheim got his 1,000th victory with an asterisk attached to it.
An asterisk?
Yeah, remember those sanctions last year when we were there, when they took away those lead jack?
Yeah, that's right.
So people in sports are pretty pumped today because they're the official 1,000. And last night, I think, or 2 nights ago, Sharon Vanderveer, the women coach at Stanford, she got her 1,000th victory as well. So a lot of basketball milestones happening this weekend. And also, I wonder if Nate Robinson was listening. You brought him up last week.
Yes.
Said he should play for somebody, and he signed a D-League contract. So
hey,
maybe we have a famous listener, but we just didn't know that yet.
That's right. D-League is better than no league, so you know how it is.
It's very, very true. It's very, very true.
Yeah.
So, and I guess he was playing overseas, or at least trying to in recent years. So to have Nate back in the NBA, I think would be a good thing. So hopefully he hooks up with a team before a playoff run. So
yeah, I'd like to see that. That'd be great.
That would be great. So, all right. Well, let's jump into segment number 1, which talking about our name actually is a great segue into this with borders. Have any anticipation, Lindsey, that politics were going to be woven into this podcast? But from what I'm seeing, it seems like sports and society and governments is becoming more and more intertwined than they've ever been, and it's crazy. And I'm sure that you saw, like everyone else this week, that this new executive order from President Trump and the administration, even though they don't want to call it an immigration ban, it essentially has a lot of components of what that would be. And the NBA is trying to figure out what this means for their league and what it means for their players. So some of your early takes on that, as far as what you think that it means for the NBA.
Yeah, well, I mean, getting players from those particular 7 countries, I don't know how many are actually from there in the NBA, if any at all. Do you know?
Well, I know 2 players that were brought up, Wasteland and Son Maynard. And I could be wrong, but didn't Son Maynard go to prep school in Canada? Because he didn't go to college. Like, he came as a 19-year-old to get him ready for the draft. And I remember hearing him coming out of Canada, but I think that, like, original citizenship, family heritage might come from one of those nations. And with Luol Deng, the Sudan,
Yeah.
is where he's originally from, which are the countries. So, yeah, this maybe doesn't directly affect any superstars, but
Yeah.
certainly some games that we're aware of.
Yeah, well, I think the one of the concerns that I have is for like the US Olympic team and players wanting to, go play overseas, as the Olympic team as a unit, and other countries just saying no thanks. If you're going to ban these particular 7, we don't want to have you in our competition. We don't want to be involved in, you know, supporting Trump's decision, whatever the case may be. I mean, the front of the New York Times today said that Iran says U.S. wrestlers aren't welcome. This is in the sports section. Um, so, there's countries that are saying, well, now, I mean, that's wrestling, but, it's affecting other players. His decision is affecting U.S. athletes to be able to go and compete. And I think that that's a huge problem. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I do think it could cause some major issues for the Olympics going forward, for sure. And of course, the way Trump talks, he says he's going to be around for 8 years. We'll see how that. But let's just even play devil's advocate. Devil's advocate and say he is around for 8 years. Now that you have even though some are going to games, maybe they're limited to 2020 summer games. How is that going to impact things? And certainly this year, this was a big. If it's not WWE, like regular real wrestling doesn't get a lot of pub. At least I don't think in the States, and probably not in North America very much. So that's why this probably wasn't this international wrestling competition in Iran. That's very important for our team USA. But it's starting to highlight some things, and I don't know if the NBA. I haven't seen anything yet that's indicated that they've gotten a response from the State Department, because obviously now the State Department can change their minds every day.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not really certain, how that's going to be handled. But yeah, international competition is going to change drastically. And I don't even care that these 7 countries may not be ones that on the global scale at the powerhouses.
Right.
They have athletes, and that needs to be respected. And clearly it's not in the situation. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Yeah, like you're saying, sports is becoming so intertwined with politics, and like we saw this past year, the whole Black Lives Matter thing, and Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, LeBron James, standing up for what they believe in. And I think that that's important because they do have that platform that they use it. So hopefully people will stand up. I'm sure there will be, but I feel like it's still not enough.
Yeah, it's not enough, and I think what a lot of athletes and maybe even particularly some NBA players for several decades didn't have to worry about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Whatever the political landscape might have been, but you don't have to go too far back in the history books to look at a Bill Russell, a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a Muhammad Ali or Jackie Robinson that were very conscious of the times on an African American side of things.
Right.
And I think athletes as a whole have just again not had to be activists, and now we're seeing such a volatile time period in our country where they're going to have to maybe step and think maybe they should stay in their lane and not really get involved, but they have a chance to influence. So
yeah,
I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah, me neither. I think it's great. I think that I appreciate them using that to help, basically.
Right, for sure. And now we're seeing coaches too, and I think sometimes that can have as equal of an impact. And I think, again, the two situations are not related, but when you had the Black Lives Matter movement, obviously there was an expectation for African American, in this case NBA players, to speak out.
Right.
And now we're seeing two white American coaches speak out on something that involves race and religion. So, if anything, and this is again a weird way to look at it, but maybe some of these crazy and inappropriate actions that are being taken place naturally, could they unify in the end? Could they actually bring people together because people are so against this negative message? And I think the NBA is out in front more than any of these other pro sports. And certainly race and culture matters without a doubt.
Right.
But they kind of join forces when race and culture matters, whereas the other leagues are very picky about what should we do, what should we not do, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It'd be like the Kaepernick NFL situation. Like, some players take a certain stance. Everyone has a different opinion, but I feel like the NBA, like you say, is more unified in their decision and what they're going to do.
Right, and this takes it a step further too, because when these teams win championships, what are players of different races and ethnicities, and even white players of different backgrounds and religious backgrounds too, are they going to say, hey, I don't want to go to Washington.
Right.
I don't want to have the ceremony because that's not what I'm all about.
Right.
We've seen players sit out of those ceremonies before, but it was always like one person here, one person there. It was kind of random. It might be even more widespread now. I'm not certain. So. Yeah.
But yeah, no. So, that's pretty. It's pretty important, this piece. Is there any other thoughts that you have about it, or?
Well, I thought what was unique was, particularly Greg Popovich and Steve Kerr talking out, and I didn't know their background until it was brought up in articles that I read this week, but to see Popovich, who actually did serve in the Air Force during his lifetime. So
right.
There's somebody who, maybe it was limited, but had a military background, so he would be able to kind of, not as authority, but as someone who could see the effects of something this could happen. That was the president of an American university in Lebanon, and he was killed at a attempt. So it was okay. Yeah. We have some individuals that may have some capital in what's being discussed, that have some experience with family members that know this type of lifestyle, or what can happen. And so I thought that kind of makes Popovich and Kerr some good people to speak out on it. You don't want just anybody opening their mouth and just saying randomness, but people would seem to be educated, informed, and but Pop's been on Trump since the campaign trail, so
yeah,
this might just give him more of a chance to really get his feelings out there. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's got a soapbox, he's got an axe to grind, but I mean, I can't blame the guy, honestly. So yeah.
No, I can't either. I was also thinking too, and you remember this, but how good of a player was Sharif Abdur-Rahim when he played for the Vancouver Grizzlies?
Lulz. He was highly revered in Vancouver. Yeah. He was our dude with Mike Bibby. Oh, yeah.
He was a stud there. And there's an individual who practiced the Muslim faith.
Yeah.
And, so this kind of stuff, alienating these individuals, and then realizing, hey, just because they practice a particular religion has no connection to the impact that they make in sport, that they make in culture. It's nuts. This is a crazy time.
Yeah. Well, I think it does have an impact maybe on culture in as far as their fans, and maybe some people feel like, man, you know what, he's Muslim, that's really cool, and they kind of get more involved in sport because they see that. So I think that it impacts it in a good way as opposed to a negative way, for sure.
There was a lot of people, actually, and I remember this, of course, when we were younger, but similar to the Kaepernick situation, there was a player, Chris Jackson, who played with the Nuggets, and he actually played in college with Shaq at LSU, and he changed his name to Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. And then, so nobody really, it was like early 90s, people really didn't understand, conversion to other faiths, or certainly there wasn't as many the popularity or the presence of Islam in the United States, I don't think was. I mean, certainly there were Islamic people, but the discussion was not at the forefront like it is now. And so I think there was a lot of people that didn't really understand that. And there was some times during the national anthem where he would pray, I believe. Like he would stand, but he would pray instead of staring at the flag. And there's a lot of criticism for that. I think again, it all comes down to when people don't know, like. They criticize. They feel like they get backed into a corner. They get
Right.
on the defense.
Yeah.
If they would just educate themselves, the clarity comes a lot faster.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. You got to keep that open. You got to keep that mind open.
Sure, and thank God that the league that we're talking about is one that seems to try to do that. So
Yeah.
that's good.
Absolutely. I love it. I love their philosophy. And now moving on to our second segment, we're going to talk about some emerging stars, right? What are we going to talk about?
Well, we're going to have some stars that are kind of in no man's land. We can call them, I guess, wasteland ballers. There's on these teams, we're like, where are they going?
Right.
Are they going to make a playoff run? So, who are some of those guys that I guess kind of come to mind, even for you, Lindsey?
The first one on my list would be DeMarcus Cousins, and that's because he is an excellent player, but he just has never really cusped, playoffs and stuff like that. And it sounds like a scapegoat, but I personally think it's because of his attitude. It sounds like an easy out, but if you're really difficult to work with, I feel like really high upper echelon teams aren't going to pick you up. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, he's in that list of that conversation for sure, and sometimes I think maybe put up at the top of that list when there's some other players I might think about that I would even maybe put ahead of DeMarcus Cousins. I was looking at his stat line even for this year, and the guy's averaging 28 a game, and just a little over 10 rebounds a game. So it's like you said, you can't argue the talent,
right?
But my comparison again, and it goes back a little bit as I tend to do, but I remember a discontentious Charles Barkley at times, but I also remember Charles Barkley playing for good Philadelphia 76ers teams, good Phoenix Suns teams, and then playing for a Houston Rockets team that was kind of filled with aging stars like Olajuwon and Drexler, but yeah, he was kind of always on relatively decent teams, and that kind of calmed down his attitude, so to speak. And we'll talk about Charles' attitude later, but
yeah.
So I want to kind of make that comparison, but they're different players, so it's hard to. And I'm not sure what team really is going to make an aggressive look at Cousins ultimately. When he plays in the Olympics, again, everybody seems to not bring their attitude A game to the Olympics. They always kind of pull it back so everything can work for the good of the team. So, again, maybe the right environment would do that for him. I just don't know.
Yeah, you never know. We'll just have to see how this plays out. I know you were saying he might end up getting to go to Boston. I just don't know how he's going to work with like Kelly Olynyk and Isaiah Thomas. I feel like their personalities are just so much different, and maybe he would go in there and be a leader and they would listen. Who knows?
I don't know. Isaiah played with him in Sacramento briefly, so I'm not sure what their relationship is. But I'm not sure. Danny Ainge always flirts that one out there, and then he doesn't pull the trigger. So I'm not certain 100%. But
yeah. I mean, looking at our list, we have people like Karl Anthony Towns. I really feel like he's like a young Dirk Nowitzki. I think he's got a lot of potential. I just think he needs a little more time, and he also. I mean, I like the Timberwolves. They're good. They're talented. Yeah, I just think he needs a little more time. What do you think?
Well, Minnesota has a lot of talent, and they over the years they've been able to collect talent. They get Wiggins. They've had Rubio for a little while, who's unfortunately injuries. We never got to see the Ricky Rubio that truly grew up in Spain and was, almost Pistol Pete-like without the scoring ability.
Yeah.
But I think the best thing for Karl Anthony Towns last year was, having Kevin Garnett in his final season.
Yeah.
And Garnett wanting to be that sort of, mentor that is so important for a lot of young players. And now when that's not there, we're seeing a Minnesota team that last year was kind of, on the cusp of maybe being a playoff team. And now this year, not really in the conversation.
Yeah.
13th place in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
And in a few ways away from, well, really, they're only about 4.5 games back from the 8th spot, but that's a good enough amount that you've got to go on a run.
Yeah.
I don't know if they will. So.
Yeah, I think it's like an ego thing. He doesn't have enough of one, and he's so talented. He could do everything. He can dribble. He could, headman the ball. He can score. He can fill the lane. He can do everything. I think he just needs to realize how important he really is.
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes to get that extra edge.
Yeah.
And, two other players on our list, which are guys that, certainly Damian Lillard has an edge, and I love him, but
yeah.
Anthony Davis is the kind of guy that really can do it all. Who obviously was a point guard coming up in high school. Then he had that huge growth spur, became more of a forward center in college, but with the skills to do everything.
Yeah.
I know the NBA doesn't want certain teams to be completely depleted. I mean, but let's face it, the league is really only so competitive anyways. There's just a few teams at the top with a chance of really making a run.
Right.
If I was any team, and of course I'm going to talk about the Celtics, but I mean, if I was any team, I would give up picks. I would wholesale trade to get a guy like Anthony Davis. I mean, that's a franchise. I mean, he gets injured too a little bit, but I mean, that's a franchise guy.
Yeah.
That you got to have.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, when are these teams going to start saying, look, I don't care how many picks we got. I don't care. Maybe we got one, borderline star. Trade them to get one of these guys because they could be a great story on a team that is going to win.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like these guys are going to be the ones, when LeBron is done and all these guys are done, they're going to be the ones that are going to be the difference makers because right now – they make good money, but they're not at the level of a LeBron James or something. So, yeah, maybe, they'll be able to get on some good teams and make it work.
And I think it's a matter of time too, Lindsey, because with this collective bargaining agreement that's supposed to explode salaries and things like that, some of these guys might be able to start commanding huge deals earlier in their career.
Right.
I think that rookie deal is still a standard of about 3 years. There's a certain minimum, I think, based on where you get drafted. But you still don't see that first initial contract necessarily be a huge contract. Well, if there's more money, now you can take a guy like Karl Anthony Towns after 3 years and offer him a huge deal to come to a big market team. And maybe that's what we're going to see, that there's going to be more cherry picking than there's ever been, grabbing these stars on these weak teams.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about our bigs, but the littles on our list, like the John Wall, the Kemba Walker, and the Damian Lillard. Kemba Walker just needs to be on a better team.
Sure.
Bottom line on that one. Roy Hibbert just got traded, right? So I just kind of feel like there's a bit of lackluster attitude on the Hornets. He's not working with a lot. He could be, but there's no get up and go there. And I mean, they're not doing so well, so that kind of makes sense why.
Well, you look at it right now, because we're kind of talking about these teams and what they can do with these guys and their success. But you've got the Hornets tied for the 8th spot right now with the Pistons.
Yeah.
But the Hornets are on a 6-game losing streak, and the Pistons have won 2.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference with what you just said right there, is that the Hornets is the type of team, they're going to rattle off that losing streak that's going to bury them.
Yeah.
Where if he was on a Pistons or a Bulls, he might be the kind of player, certainly, the Bulls, if they don't want to go with the Rondo route, that he would be a great point guard to have there. And then you would see the Bulls working their way up in the playoff standings, before everything is said and done. So that's the thing, is I don't think we want a league that's top heavy. But if that's just the way things are going to go, then these teams at the top need to be aggressive and just start, telling the Hornets, like, sorry guys, but we need your best players.
Yeah, give the kid a chance, right?
Right.
Yeah, Damian Lillard. There's just the Portland Trailblazers are always just so close. They need a difference maker. They need a difference maker. They need a Blake Griffin or something.
Well, I think they had it in Marcus Aldridge.
Yeah.
And I think people have discussed that his marriage with San Antonio really, it's not horrendous, but it just wasn't what he thought it was going to be.
Yep.
And when they had that, Lillard and McCollum kind of, in their first couple of years with an established, Aldridge, LaMarcus Aldridge, it was kind of like, oh, this team can really make some moves.
Yeah.
And now he leaves, and it's left with the two guards, and it's not the same.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Golden State can get away with it with Steph and Clay, but these little mini Splash Brothers are, they're good. They're amazing. They just need that extra piece. They need like an Iguodala or something, to help them out.
They need a glue guy. They need a leadership situation. And I think when you look at some of the players we mentioned and then some of the teams that they mentioned, or that they play for, I think when people talk about, like who's your favorite League Pass team, that team you're going to watch on Tuesday night late when you can't go to sleep and you're saying, oh, that's a fun team to watch. And that's what these teams are. They're League Pass teams. Like they're going to get a really fun win on a Monday night and you're going to say, hey, I wish Anthony Davis was playing for my team or he was playing for said team. But that's about all it is. And, I think that sometimes the product on the prime time nights during the week, maybe we shouldn't have the Warriors on every night and the Cavs on every night because there are some of these teams that could feature a great player or a fun game, and we're just not getting enough exposure.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. I never really thought about that, but that could maybe make the difference for some of these guys on this list. You never know.
Yeah.
Any exposure.
I don't want to have to turn on, NBA TV game of the week at like 2:00 in the afternoon on a Wednesday to get a really good look at Damian Lillard. I'd like him to be on TNT on Thursday or one of the ESPN nights.
Yeah.
So,
I like that. I like it.
So we'll see. I mean, it's interesting what these teams are going to do with these players, and if it's going to take an off-season move or maybe a late blockbuster here at the trade deadline coming up in just over 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of variables and dominoes, and certainly we'll see what happens as it plays itself out.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, let's take our first break of the show, and we'll be back in just a few seconds here to have our great segment called Trust the Process with Coach Tyler.
That's right.
All things 76ers and beyond.
He's back, baby. He's back.
We're back here on Borderline Ballers. We've had some real spirited conversations so far about, some of the political connections with the NBA and professional sports, and some great talents on some teams that are out there in the middle of the NBA desert, just hoping to drink from the playoff Kool-Aid. But we are back with Tyler Sadallah to give us some time to talk about the Sixers, more Joel Embiid updates. And so here we are with Trust the Process. So, Coach, how you doing today?
Good. What's going on, guys?
Not much. Thanks for coming back.
My pleasure.
How's Sixers today? Feeling good about things? Week of Sixers life.
We've had a rough week. The Sixers have played about 4 games since we talked last. They've gone 1-3, but Embiid hasn't played. He's got a left knee contusion. He hasn't been playing lately, so I don't know if maybe we're resting him up for the Rising Stars Challenge, or what that's hopefully.
I hope that's not a team goal.
It might be. Who knows?
It's all part of the process.
Yeah, the Colangelos. Who knows what's going on with them? But anyways, we also found out Embiid's going to be playing in the Skills Challenge on NBA All-Star Weekend, so that's going to be fun to watch. They'll be playing with a couple other big guys.
Now that's the one with the dribbles, the passes, the layups, the threes, right? That's like the competition. Okay.
Yeah, they have that little. It's like you run, you do a layup, then you have like those little holes you got to hit with the pass or the bounce pass or something. Yep. So I mean, this is the second big. So I don't know how that go. So I guess we'll have to wait and find out.
Well, that'll be good. So we are talking about the Sixers and Noel and Okafor. Do you think that they will get to turn the reins over to Embiid and Simmons at some point?
I think, as of right now, my personal opinion, I think Philly needs to move one of these guys, Okafor or Noel. I don't think it would be a good idea to move them both right now, but eventually I think the culture we talked about last week, it will shift over to Embiid and Simmons.
Yeah.
There's a couple of entry. So I've been kind of fooling around with that in the past week, seeing Philly could get forward. It's just hard right now because I think their stock is kind of low because a lot of teams know that Philly needs to get rid of these guys because they have such a big log jam. But I thought, which was kind of interesting, that we heard this week was the Bulls. Bulls have an interest in Jahlil Okafor.
Right.
And
Who do you think? Sorry, go ahead.
We know old Sixer Carter Williams is on the Bulls. I'm not sure if maybe, I don't know, they're going to try and get a guard here or what, but I don't know what really the Bulls can offer for Okafor.
Yeah, if you had your pick of anyone that they could trade for, who would you put on the 76ers?
I would love obviously I would want it to go both ways. So I'd love to get maybe a draft pick, a mid-level draft pick, but a player that I really like is actually from your Toronto Raptors. I really like Norman Powell. I don't know if you guys have watched a lot of Raptors basketball lately, but he's a great 3-and-D guy.
Nice. That's an interesting pick. I like that pick. Keep him on the East Coast. You like that East Coast? Okay.
I do. I really think Philly obviously needs a guard.
Yeah.
And I think someone like a Norman Powell, or even if you're sticking with Toronto, a Terrence Ross kind of player. Obviously, Philly's really flexible and cap space, so that would work.
Yeah.
I really like Alan Crabb from Portland.
Nice. Yes.
Philly was looking to actually sign him in the off season, but Portland kind of would match any offer. So I think Crabb would be a nice piece in there to slot for when Simmons comes back, somebody to kind of drive and kick to.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you bring up some of these names, Tyler, because, I look at, what the Celtics have done over the last couple of years, and now they've got certainly emerging stars, and Isaiah Thomas is becoming quite a superstar. But they've taken a lot of role players, and those role players have learned to elevate their game into, being much bigger, being borderline all-stars, being players that have a much higher ceiling than they probably did when they came in. And certainly Philly made the splash with the draft picks, but the players that you're talking about, and I even think of some of the players on the team like McConnell and Stauskas, and can Philly follow a similar model like that, where they're going to end up with these players that maybe are more like an 8 through 12 guy on somebody's roster, but really have the capability of being, close to a star?
And that's hard to see. Like you said, Boston, it's just all about building up assets and just trying to cash in your chips. And I think when Philly drafted Okafor, they thought maybe he was kind of like a big chip to push to the table in and say, listen, we have some of these key guys we think can be stars. What can you give us for them? So it'll be interesting to see going forward what Philly does if they wait past the trade deadline and keep Noel and Okafor and maybe go into the draft and see where teams' needs are going into free agency as well. But I think Philly has at least, I would say out of all their big men right now, I would say at least 3 or 4 should be part of the long-term quote-unquote process. We mentioned Embiid when Simmons comes back, Dario Saric, and then I don't know what they're going to do with an Ersan Ilyasova or guys like that. So I think at least 3 or 4 of those guys need to stay long-term. So it's just how can Philly flip these other guys for needs?
Right, and a guy that I've seen for Philly, and you know, you and I have had some conversations prior to the show about, you know, me going and seeing the Sixers and you being disappointed that it's not you. But when I've seen them on television, I see Robert Covington. And what type of impact has he made for Philadelphia? I mean, here's a guy wouldn't be on anybody's radar. It seems like he's playing a lot and he's quite a contributor.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, he was in the D League for the Rio Grande, which is Houston's system, the Vipers, and Philly kind of picked him up halfway through the season, gave him one of those 10-day contracts, and he kind of stuck around. He was a part of, I believe it was Brett Brown's first year, so the original Sam Hinkie process situation. And his value, I think, has gone up tremendously. Obviously, on kind of a playoff contender, I think he would be, like you said, a lower tier 8 to 12 guy. But the crowd loves him, and they've had a love-hate relationship with him. We saw a couple weeks ago he was kind of in a shooting slump, and the Sixers had a home game, and they were all booing him every time he got the ball, and he ended up hitting the game-winning shot in that game. So it was kind of cool. Then after he hit the game-winning shot, obviously the crowd went wild. But he's a nice pickup for some of the younger guys because, like we said, he's been there. He's kind of seen the culture change, and I think going forward he would be a nice complementary player to have on your team.
Sure. So also looking too, in addition to Sixers, you know, their team process, which we're going to touch upon, you know, rather frequently. There's going to leap and making a jump here this season.
A couple players that I liked when you talk about jumping. A couple teams that I liked. Has anybody watched the Mavs? Has anybody watched the Mavs play the past couple weeks?
I saw highlights from a game. Oh, actually, they played last night against Portland, and I saw a little bit of it, but that was it.
They got some young players who are going bonkers right now.
Oh.
Yogi Ferrell dropped 32 points yesterday against Lillard and McCollum, and he's on a 10-day contract. He did the Jordan shrug at halftime.
Lol.
He had like 6 threes in the first half. It was pretty crazy. But Dallas has got a lot of nice guys that I like, a lot of young guys. Obviously, you just think of Dirk, obviously, is the main cog of the Mavericks team. But I like Harrison Barnes. I like Wes Matthews is finally back. He had an awful Achilles injury, but he's back to playing a 3-and-D kind of guy. But I think, if Dallas can get another kind of big pick, maybe, I think they could be really good.
That's interesting.
I think Dallas is kind of, obviously, as you said, the identity was with Dirk, and now that he's on the end of his career, they almost like Dallas's run is kind of just, falling apart, so to speak. But, they made some decent moves in the offseason that just haven't really panned out, either due to injuries or what have you. So, they're probably a team that, give them another year or two with this young nucleus, that they could be a playoff team again.
And I think that just goes to show how good of a coach Rick Carlisle really is. He's taken a lot of these, garbage, what seem to be garbage players, and Dallas doesn't really have any high draft picks. These guys who we see are playing 30, 35 minutes a game. Farrell, Dorian Finney-Smith from Florida undrafted are all on like 10-day contracts. So I think it just goes to show how Carlisle is kind of, being a great coach and pushing these guys to play above their potential.
For sure.
Maybe the Sixers could get a Rick Carlisle. How about that?
Oh, I'd love it. I love it. Really, Rep Brown gives me a lot of headaches. I will admit.
Well, but somebody needs to give some love to Brett Brown, because who would have ever agreed to go into this situation and say, yeah, I want to coach this team that's going to deplete their roster over and over again. And, now they're actually making some, minimal moves, and so, yeah, I agree. A better coach would make that situation better, but Brett Brown needs a hug from somebody, whoever wants to give it to him.
Yeah. Maybe you can go onto the crowd, go out onto the court and give him a hug before the game starts when you go to the game.
I'm probably not going to do that, and as far as I know, my seats are up in the second level. They are in the fourth row, so it's kind of like hanging over things, so that's good, but I don't think Brett and I will have an exchange. So this will be my third time in Philly seeing a game, but my first time seeing a pro game there, so it'll be an interesting experience without a doubt.
Yeah, that'll be nice.
I'm excited to hear your take on it after.
Well, I'll inject a little bit, but I'm not gonna take this segment away from you, Coach. So
I'm glad to share the stage.
Yeah, well, you have the stage for sure. But as we shift the stage here to some bit of controversy that took place this week, we're gonna keep you on, Coach, for another segment if that's okay. Lindsey, why don't you give us some backstory? What is going on with Charles Barkley and LeBron James? What kind of altercations are we having here?
So, just to say it quite simply, Charles Barkley just feels like LeBron James shouldn't be complaining about the fact that they lost a bunch of games in January, and he needs a playmaker, he needs a point guard, someone to help them. You're at the top of the Eastern Conference standings. What more do you want? You are the best player in the world at the moment. What more do you want, is what Charles Barkley is saying. What are you worried about? That's basically it, and I hate to say this because Charles Barkley can be public enemy number one. What's that? Tim?
Didn't you say your niece could play for the Cavs?
Yeah!
You said that last week, so really, I mean, if that's the case, then you should probably keep the shot, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have to agree with Charles, as controversial as he can be sometimes. What about you guys? Like, do you agree with him, or do you think that LBJ was justified in what he said?
Tyler, go ahead and take this one. I'm still digesting it all. All right. Well, when I first saw this at the beginning of the week, I just figured it's Charles Barkley. He's got a big mouth. He's got to have a say. But I feel like whenever LeBron comes back and fires back, everybody kind of picks their head up. Like, whoa, okay, now it's a feud. Now that LeBron is getting involved and saying his own opinion. So I mean, I think it's so interesting to see this dynamic. And I mean, I wasn't really around in the Jordan era, so you guys can I'd have to ask you. But have we ever seen a player like LeBron where he is just on this pedestal to whenever he has something to say, everybody kind of gravitates towards him? I mean, did Jordan ever have that kind of pull?
He never really, as far as I remember, he never really said much. He was more quiet. He wasn't as out there publicly. Tim?
I don't remember the opportunity to be out there publicly like there is now. These tweets and these Instagram posts and these things that go along with that actual conversation. It was like if you were Jordan, the only opportunity that you were going to have to really speak out on things was that post-game interview. So there, or some sort of newspaper article or magazine piece. Jordan was. I try to want to use appropriate adjectives here, but I mean he was really, really difficult on his teammates, and I mean that's well documented. So that type of pull, maybe I don't think was overt like it is with LeBron, but I think that he definitely probably let management know through his actions. I mean, it didn't take much to go to a practice and watch, but it's not the culture that it is today. And this is unique, I think.
and how it's being presented to us.
Yeah. I mean, like LeBron James or Charles Barkley said, he feels like LeBron James gets whatever he wants. He wants Kevin Love, they give him Kevin Love. He wants Korver, they give him Korver. He wanted J.R. Smith, they give him Smith, right? Like it just, he kind of gets his way. And I feel like Charles is right. And, you know, basically LeBron's saying he's disrespecting my legacy. And Charles Barkley's like, you know what? I'm good with what I said. My criticism's fair. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But now it's created this beef. And, yeah, I just think that LeBron James, he, like Tyler said, he's more willing to just say whatever is on his mind. And everyone does sit up and take notice. It's true.
Well, and it's definitely a player-driven league now, and not that I think it was not, you know, if you go back a few decades, but I think really only certain players maybe drove the league, you know, with their presence. But now it's like if you're the star on a team, and particularly with LeBron, you know, you have that audience built in already.
Yeah.
That you can. And it's kind of like, but you know what, LeBron, you left Cleveland when you were unhappy, and then you came back, and obviously it's made you happy with 2 trips to the finals. But this was all your decision, different than the decision, which took so much criticism. But this is all your decision, you know. So you kind of like make your bed, you have to lie in it, like, and you have to make the best of a situation. So I don't even know who I agree with, and that brings me to the next question for both of you, like, do former NBA players, whether you have a legendary status or you're just a retiree or whatever the case may be, but do these guys need to stay in their lane and figure out whether or not they're relevant to kind of contribute to the conversation? I mean, Barkley, it's interesting because he's on television, so that gives him a voice, it gives him a vehicle. But you know, heard comments, you know, from the Robertsons and from Jordan, like when Jordan gave his Hall of Fame speech and just kind of like went off on everybody that he ever played against. So, do these people need to shut up or what?
Tyler?
I think they do in specific situations, and I think we saw a lot of this starting last season or even a couple seasons ago when Steph Curry was kind of on the rise, and there was a ton of Hall of Fame players, Oscar Robertson included, who came out and they said, you know, no way he could play in our league, and that's ridiculous. So I think in that sort of situation, I think these kind of Hall of Famers need to kind of stay in their own lane, because Oscar Robertson, obviously we would never know if Steph Curry could play in the 1960s.
Right.
So I don't even know why you would bring that up. That's almost impossible to have a discussion on that. But obviously it's different for Charles Barkley and a lot of Hall of Famers who are on national TV, and that's kind of their job to talk about these issues. And I think where LeBron kind of went wrong where he spit back at Charles is he kind of went at his character and he said, you know, I'm a role model and you weren't a role model because you were like jumping out of windows and you spit on someone. And he said this quote unquote, and I thought that was kind of ridiculous to say. But I'm glad Charles didn't go back at him. He just kind of said, you know, I'm satisfied with what I said.
Yeah.
Lindsey, what about you?
No, I totally agree with you that he's entitled to make that decision and opinion. I mean, like, if I can sit here on this podcast and have an opinion and I've never played in the NBA, you know what I mean? I don't have a job reporting on the sideline, and I can have this opinion. I mean, Charles Barkley is more than qualified to have this opinion. And I think LeBron, I don't know why it bothers LeBron James so much. I guess because people are listening to Charles Barkley, but people can deduct for themselves whatever they want. But it is interesting that he bites and like fights back. I don't know what that's about, but yeah, that's what I agree with you, Tyler.
And you saw like different players too, like Dwayne Wade, one of his buddies. He said something. He's like, "Oh yeah, I totally agree with LeBron. Like, this is ridiculous."
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see like these little layers of other players coming out and supporting one side or another.
Yeah, like supporting their best friend. That's cool, but I mean, it doesn't. I don't think what Charles Barkley said discredits LeBron James, and he felt discredited, so then he's going to discredit Charles Barkley. And it's like, well, really, there's no point. To me, there's no point in doing that.
Right.
I think, you if I jump in just here at the end, I don't. Again, it's hard for me to have an opinion on this because there is a respect for legends and there's a respect for what's going on now. But I will say that there's two types of former players. There's one that embraces what's going on right now. I mean, you see that. I think you see that a lot with Bill Russell. And they named the MVP of the finals after him, that trophy. So of course he kind of has to be there to pass it off, but he seems to really support what's going on. And then you have the people that just don't know how or don't want to pass the torch. And I think Barkley's kind of in between because I think he has good relationships with some current players, and then he is not with other players. And what they should or shouldn't do is not my call. Like Lindsey, like you said, I mean, I never played in the NBA. I only played the video games, so I can't or anything.
It's close enough, man.
Yeah, it's super close. So it's I have a strong take, but I just hope that we don't see this like consistently going on forever. Like at some point, like people just have to know it is what it is. The game has changed, times have changed, and accept them. And criticism's okay, but low blows back and forth don't solve anything. So
yeah. I mean, I actually enjoy watching Charles Barkley get underneath people's skin. I think it's funny.
Yeah, there's an element.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, TNT and TBS. Well, obviously not TBS anymore, but originally those were the games on cable. I mean, ESPN didn't come into basketball, at least on the NBA side, probably till about maybe 10 or 12 years ago.
Yeah.
But it really took off on TNT when they put Ernie Johnson together with Charles, and I don't think Kenny should be on TV, but that's my opinion. And then Shaq adds a new element in, and then now they've got Kevin Garnett with this Area 21. They've done different things to really improve their ratings and their presentation.
Yeah.
And, so you're going to have those things happen sometimes. You have to have that balance between do we want people to watch or do we want to give, completely accurate opinions on things. Sometimes there's theatrics that are going to play a role for sure.
Yeah. But as much as there are theatrics, I do feel like Charles is a lot of stuff he says is pretty true. And I think it's just people just don't want to hear it sometimes because it's not the popular opinion. But, I mean, that's just my opinion, so.
LeBron should have hit him on his golf game. I mean, it would have been obvious.
Yeah, right?
Instead he goes right to the I'm not a role model commercial from like 1991.
He should have just tweeted a YouTube link of Barkley's golf swing. That's it. No commenting on it.
And that's what people like, the passive-aggressive social media users these days, like, that's what they do. So, like, that would be perfect to just, that's almost like the 3-1 lead thing that he did at the, the Halloween party. Like, just do that and just diagram the swing. So.
That's funny. I like that.
But anyways, well, Coach, thanks for staying on for another segment with us, and we look forward to all your knowledge as we go forward throughout the year, and good stuff as usual, my man.
Of course. Thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler.
This wonderful show.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Take it easy, guys.
Okay. Bye.
Let's try to size up the power rankings and where we think teams are. So I'm gonna let you go first. Give us your top 5 in each conference and a little rationale for that.
Okay, so let's start with the East. The East is a little more straightforward for me. The top, like our top 5 are Cavs, Celtics, Wizards, Raptors, and Hawks. And to be honest with you, I'm not gonna move any of those.
Okay.
I didn't think it was worth it to move the Pacers up a couple. I just thought Cavs, absolutely. There's no question in my mind. Celtics, I love that they're second right now. I love that. I might move.
I'm glad you love that. That keeps you on the show.
Yeah, that's the only reason. It's the only reason, right, Tim?
No, that's not the only reason.
I would bump the Raptors above the Wizards just because of how they're playing right now. The Hawks, yeah, and I would leave the Hawks as they are. I really don't like the Hawks in 5th, but I can't imagine. I don't know who I would replace them with at this point. So, yeah, so that's pretty cut and dried for me. What about the East for you?
Well, it's similar to yours. Obviously we'll put Cleveland at the top, and certainly I have enough time to talk about the Celtics, so we'll leave them at number 2, and I'll say other things later. But I really like the way Washington's playing now, and I put them at number 3, and I don't know whether I believe in them or not. Actually, I think one of the things that's propelled them, they're on a 6-game winning streak, is that they had that little altercation with the Celtics, and then when Boston came down to play them in Washington, they all wore like black to the game. I'm not really sure what their rationale was, but that was maybe just that turning point that the Wizards needed, because they still have a lot of talent with Wall and Beal and Gortat, and just a nice little mix there. And I would put the Raptors fourth, but second behind Washington. I haven't seen a lot from Toronto lately. They're on a 2-game losing streak. I just don't. I like some of the players, but I don't know what they think they are in Toronto. And remember, last year they went to the Eastern Conference Final.
Exactly.
Whether they're going to be Eagle or not, that was a huge accomplishment for the organization. And then my number 5 is whomever. I don't really care.
Yeah.
I don't have anybody to put at number 5. I don't believe in the Hawks, the Pacers, the Bulls, the Pistons. Anybody else. So that's an open spot for me. It may say that the Hawks are 5th in the conference, but whoever wants it, it's
I know.
really top heavy.
I had to agree with you. I was like, really, the Hawks? What was that?
Any team with Dwight Howard, I can't take seriously. It's only a matter of time. It'd be like, Houston had all that talent, and then they had Dwight Howard. It just didn't work.
Amen, brother.
So,
Amen.
I have no faith in what he brings to the table. If it was Dwight Howard circa 2005, 6, 7 on Orlando, I might look a little bit differently at things, but
A decade ago.
So, yeah. So what about the West? Let's
all right.
That. What are you thinking?
The West. Okay, so I would do right now. Okay, I would leave the Warriors as they are. The Spurs, I would also leave them. I would move. You know what? Okay, I'm gonna leave the Rockets at 3rd, but I'm gonna move the Grizzlies from what are they right now? 6th, 6th or 7th, maybe 6th.
Yeah.
I'm bumping them to 4th. I like them. Conley just signed a huge contract extension. They're going places this season. Tony Allen is one of my favorite players to watch this season, which sounds so silly because he's a role player, but he's so good and he's such a grinder. I'm moving them to 4th, and then
it's not.
What's that?
It's not silly. I mean, when Tony Allen was on the Celtics, he used to frustrate the hell out of me.
I know.
I'd be like, you can't score. What can you do? But then when he went to the Grizzlies, he became a legitimate, like you said, he's a role player, but great defender. He'll get you 15 points a night, which is, not something he used to do. So, no, that's not silly at all. That's legit.
Nice. Sure. Okay, we're on the same page. So I moved them to 4th, and I moved the Clippers 5th. And I just bumped the Jazz out. So, Clippers, they've had some injuries, right? And I'd love to see the Clippers 2nd, to be honest with you. They're my 2nd pick. They're my favorite team in the West, but they're just not at the right caliber. They're not healthy. So, that's my 5. What about you?
Well, Golden State, the video game squad, as I like to call them. I think their GM is the same kid that had the video games back in the 90s and would just trade for all the good guys and then be like, yo, I started a season with the Sonics and Jordan and Pippen and Gary Payton and Sean Kemp on the same team. I'm like, dude, you're an idiot. So that's where Golden State is. They're in the stratosphere. And obviously San Antonio. But this is unique for San Antonio because, how long is this run going to go. You know, they seem to plug in the right players all the time. But eventually, you know, Ginobili's going to retire, and certainly Parker's going to retire. So I think the Spurs fans need to not enjoy it while it lasts, because I don't think it's going to completely end, but it's never going to be like their top 5 kind of team, I think, very soon. Houston, you know, James Harden's having a great year, so we can't argue with that.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to take OKC and put them in my 4th.
Ooh.
I think you cannot underestimate Russell Westbrook. You cannot underestimate what they've already gone through as a unit, and guys like Steven Adams and Enes Kanter, you know, that have just really improved themselves down low. And they're always a great team to watch. And I'll give respect to Utah with what they've done with their organization to get to this where they are really in the 5th spot in real life. And then in my Tim's life power rankings, they're also number 5.
Nice.
But I'm
Okay.
going to flip the script a little bit. There are certain teams in sports I just don't like, and I'll have to really think about who some of them are. And actually, like in baseball, I really don't like the Chicago White Sox, and you'd think it would be the Yankees, and I don't like them either.
Yeah.
But just don't like the White Sox. There's something about them I don't like. Well, I think it translates to that in the NBA.
Uh-huh.
If there was like the I hate team, it would be the Clippers. I just don't like the
Oh.
Clippers. Now, it has nothing to do with the individual players, other than, just like I said with Dwight Howard, any team with Blake Griffin I don't trust.
Yeah.
I just don't like Blake Griffin's game. So I'm being extremely biased here, because the Clippers are very talented and are likely to be in the mix here to make it to at least the second round of the playoffs. But I always kind of pull them out of a power ranking situation, because they just never seem to get the most out of what they have.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like, you know, when Tyler was talking about Rick Carlisle, and then you have the Popoviches, and those 2 coaches seem to get the most out of their players. I wonder what it is about that Clippers franchise that just can't. I mean, they're so stacked. Like, they have everyone. They've got Paul Pierce, they've got Chris Paul, they've got Jamal Crawford. They have literally everybody. Like, why can't we just make this all work? And why can't you challenge the Warriors for the top spot? Like, to me, that would be... There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to on paper. But it is what it is.
There's something missing. I don't know.
So what I was saying then is that there seems to be a lack of buy-in, and I don't know what that is. You know, I can't seem to pinpoint it with this team, because, you know, maybe the fact that Blake Griffin is injured a lot, or he's doing Kia commercials or whatever, but he's like not, he's just not there, you know. And I think that Chris Paul is a great talent, but has like somewhat of a contentious personality. DeAndre Jordan's a little spacey. That whole thing where they courted him at the house, and I don't know, like, there's just a lot of drama. Maybe it's that LA drama, and the Clippers really like embrace it, and as a result just never seem to be able to get to the hump. Right. So, you know, yes, I may loathe the Clippers, but I can acknowledge what's there, but the pieces don't fit.
Yeah.
So
yeah, go ahead. You go for it.
If we were going to look at our power rankings too for all the teams that are not named the Clippers and the Warriors, who are your best 5 in the NBA? Not those. I mean, it's going to be teams we already talked about, but that those 2 teams are not in that list.
Right. My top 5 are going to be the Celtics, the Spurs, the Grizzlies. Oh yeah. The Raptors and the Rockets.
There's some Vancouver heart there a little bit, right?
There might be a little bit Vancouver bias in there.
Before we even expand on that, answer this question. How many people from Vancouver moved on with Memphis and still rooted for them? Like, if you could gauge, like, what percentage do you think? Because sometimes there's always those teams, like when the Rams moved to LA, how many people from St. Louis remained a Rams fan?
Right.
So I'm always curious, like, what happened after that relocation?
My guess is probably 20% of people. And it's probably less than that. It's probably more like 5, but I'm going to say 20%. There's a ton of Lakers fans in Vancouver. It's gross.
And probably the Blazers, too, a little bit, right?
Blazers, Raptors, right? It's Canada's team.
Right.
Yeah, those are the...
Anyone still holding on to the Sonics?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
So there's quite an array of rooting interest then going on in British Columbia.
Absolutely, yeah. It's across the board. But what about you? What are your top 5, not including the Cavs and the Warriors?
I'll put the Spurs up there just because it's kind of the old reliable Spurs. Again, I'm really high on Oklahoma City, so that would be my second team. Anybody that has Westbrook, and what he's doing this year, and then like I talked about earlier, having players that have been through some of the playoff wars, I feel strongly with them. I'll put Boston at third because of my heart, but I'm also realistic in that as great of a year as Isaiah is having, I don't know how long this is going to last. I hope it lasts a long time, but I don't know. And then, Houston, and I like this ride that Washington is on, but I think that 5 spot in any of our lists is always that movable spot.
Yeah.
So whoever was there the week before might not be there again, and so on and so forth. So
Nice. All right.
So that tackles our power rankings, and I'm sure we'll bring those back as time goes on. So
You gotta have them.
yeah.
So do you want to bring us home with your buzzer beater, Tim's takes?
Yeah, let's do some buzzer beaters here to wrap up the show. So I promise that it's not going to be like a Boston or a Celtics minute every single time I do these, but there just seems to be some pertinent things that are happening. And so just kind of a rundown real quick. Last night, Isaiah Thomas was going for his third consecutive 40-point game. No one had ever done that for the Celtics. It would have put him in obviously a category that is legendary beyond words. But he ends up with 38, and I think the Celtics tried to foul a little bit at the end and get him the ball, but it didn't work out.
Yep.
But to even have 2 games of 40-plus, if you took 2 points from some of those 40-plus games and added it, his average over the week was over 40. So I'll take that. And I think Celtic fans are learning to really appreciate Isaiah and actually accept Isaiah Thomas on the Celtics. I mean, there's still a lot of deep-seated Pistons hate in Boston.
Right.
That we still just can't believe that this is possible, that an Isaiah would be on the Celtics. But I'm pumped about that, and I'm really excited for Brad Stevens. I fell in love with Brad Stevens. He doesn't know this, but I'll share it with him someday. When he was the Butler coach, and when he became the Celtic coach, I was kind of, I wasn't sure, but I said, he's got the demeanor to coach in the NBA, and now that he's going to be the All-Star coach for the East, I think just says a lot about what he's accomplished in a handful of years. I feel bad, not really, but I feel bad for Ty Lue because he's kind of getting penalized because David Blatt was actually the All-Star coach for 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
Or maybe Ty Lue got to do it. I forget when they fired Blatt last year, but the rule is you can't have 2 consecutive years. So
right.
Why it's going to Brad Stevens. So there's that, and then Paul Pierce's last game in Boston is tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a real emotional time. I mean, he's already had his video tributes with the other teams that he's played with, but that's for another podcast to talk about Paul Pierce and his Celtic, status. But last night too, the Celtics beat the Lakers, and now they have the most wins in the history of the NBA. Not a stat that anybody really talks about. So a lot of Celtics nuggets, not Denver Nuggets, but like Celtics this week to kind of hit on. And then finally, rounding it out with, this might be an NBA show, but my Patriots are again in the Super Bowl, and I know it really bothers a lot of people. I mean, we're like the Dallas Cowboys, not that I'm on the team, but we're like the Yankees. Like, people just don't want to root for us. But Tom Brady cementing himself potentially is, I don't like using the GOAT phrase. It's way overused. I'm done with that. But I'll say greatest of all time. I'll use the whole thing.
You got to say the whole acronym.
Yeah, I like the whole acronym. I'm done seeing the GOAT emojis. I don't want to see that anymore. But if he gets to number 5, again, like we talked about with Barkley and LeBron, some people just don't want to pass the torch. But all little scandals aside, I mean, this is turning into be one of the greatest careers of all time. So my Super Bowl pick, New England Patriots, 27, Atlanta Falcons 24.
Whoa.
Real tight, and but some really exciting scoring when it happens. So
Yeah.
So enough with the Boston homage. What's Lindsey's list this week?
I don't have a ton on my list this week. But one thing I wanted to talk about next week that I wanted to put on my list this week is the Denver Nuggets. We got to talk about them.
We do.
We got to talk about them. And so that's going to be for next week. I want to say that this week. I'm interested. I want to talk about your Super Bowl pick quick and comment on what mine is just because that's tomorrow. And, yeah, my original pick was Falcons are going to win it 35-28. But I'm a little nervous now that the Falcons are going to, get to that big stage and then freak out and not be able to perform. So I'm still going to stick with my my original prediction, Falcons 35, Patriots 28. But I'm a little nervous now. As the day approaches, I'm a little more nervous.
I do like this show better when we're on the same page, but I understand it's important to have two separate picks.
Yep.
Just for the sake of doing that.
Yep. Yeah. Maybe Julio Jones will just kill it tomorrow, like he's been doing all season. So we will see.
There's a chance. There's a chance for anything.
Absolutely.
Except for tomorrow, that will not happen.
Yeah, except for tomorrow. Yeah, so basically that is it. My Super Bowl pick, and then I want to talk about the Nuggets next week. But yeah, maybe they'll have a great week this week, and then it'll be something crazy to talk about. So
It's always good to have a teaser.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you just gave us a 4-piece nugget when we really wanted a 6.
Oh.
And you just kind of dangled the dollar menu 4-piece nugget out there in front of us. So now we're intrigued, and we want to know why we're going to bring up the current 8th seed Denver Nuggets next week.
That's right. Okay. I like that. Little McDonald's analogy. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
It's cliche, but, we're loving it. So.
Nice. All right, Tim. Well, it has been a pleasure as always.
It has, and I look forward to next week, and obviously I'll have some Philadelphia 76ers knowledge to bring back to the show.
I can't wait. I am so looking forward to you going to this game.
Well, we're going to, it's too bad we can't do a live from the game, but we'll definitely have some good takes after the fact. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks, and it's been great. Take care.
All right, you too, and we'll be seeing you next week on Borderline Ballers.
Holla!